Like we promised you, we are now going to be getting into our segment Living Legends, and tonight we are celebrating Professor Wanjiku Mukabi Kabira, who features tonight as a literature scholar whose work is not just in the world of letters but also in women's rights advocacy. Has several books under her name, including Celebrating Women's Resistance, The Oral Artist, Our Secret Lives, and They Have Destroyed the Temple. Just some of the books she has written to highlight the plight of women and the journey in women rights advocacy in the country. Daniel Wahome had a sit down with the professor of literature, who is also the founder of the University of Nairobi's African Women's Studies Center. We leave you now with that interview. My name is Safina Chieng Oma, and our sign language interpreter for the night has been Lensa Odingo. Enjoy.
Good day. My name is Daniel Wahome. In this edition of the Living Legends, we speak to a scholar who has been actively involved in ensuring that there is women's participation in everyday life. She started as a literature scholar before getting actively involved in mobilizing women to get involved in the country's social, economic, and political spheres. She chaired the Department of Literature at the University of Nairobi and established the Africa Women's Studies Center, and also served as the Vice Chair of the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission until 2005. Our guest on the Living Legends today is Professor Wanjiku Mukabi Kabira. Professor, welcome, and thank you for your time today. Professor, as with every edition of the Living Legends, tell us about your early life and education, from primary school through secondary school, and how you got into literature.
I went to Githirioni primary school. That was a government school in Lari, in Kiambu district. And for high school, I went to Loreto Limuru. And Loreto Limuru was it's a boarding school, it's a national school, you must know it, Loreto Secondary Limuru. And I did my Form 4 there, and then I went to make a long story short, I did not really continue. I went to Kenyatta College for 1 year. I wanted to do S1, but then I decided I was going to go to the convent, which I did. I think around 1968, 69. And I was there for 11 years. But while there, I also went to did A level in Loreto Msogari. And although I was a science student in high school, where I was doing biology, chemistry, mathematics, but also we did the other subjects, like we did English, literature, and other subjects. When I decided to do A level, I was much more interested in the arts. So I changed my subject from, science subjects, and did history, religious studies, and literature. And I was there's a sense in which all those are philosophical subjects and critical subjects. And I think they formed probably the foundation that made me who I am today, even in the women's movement. So in fact, I remember I was the best in class in literature with other students. And after Form 6, I taught for 1 year in Kiambu, Loreto Kiambu, and also in a little bit in Eldoret, and a little bit in Taru, which is in Mombasa. And then I was allowed, since I was in the convent, to go to university, where I was accepted in 1975 September. So where I chose to do literature, philosophy, Greek, and sociology. So there were subjects which were humanities, related subjects. And again, it was very interesting to be in a philosophy class. In fact, when we were studying at that time, we could either do 3-2-1 or 3-1-1, meaning that you could do 3 subjects at the beginning, and then you drop the first 2, and you specialize in one. When I came to the second year, I was actually offered 311 in literature, meaning I specialize in literature, which is what I did. But I also decided I would continue with the philosophy on my own. Greek was actually, a subject that I was interested in terms of languages, and also to be able to read the Bible in its original form and so on. So, but that one was not a subject that was, I was going to carry to the end. So, but with philosophy, I continued dealing with it, although I was specializing in literature. So, I think the literature that we were studying at the time, or even the manner in which we studied, there was a lot of radical thinking that wasn't happening either in high school or in A level by the Department of Literature, when we changed from Department of English to Department of Literature. Because literature involved not just the English language, although we did it in translation, but it involved literature, global literature, and as well as African and Kenyan literature. And there was a very dynamic leader, lecturer, Anyuba Obur, who was an expert in oral literature and in fieldwork related oral literature. So we were actually traveling all over Kenya, dialoguing with communities, learning from communities, listening to oral narratives, to proverbs and so on. In fact, to what you call communities' wisdom and so on in oral literature. And then, let me say this because I think it's also very important. The approach to the literature at the time, which was adopted by the department, used the principle that you need to know what your literature is before learning what other people's literature are saying. Because through literature you learn about the people's philosophy, their values, and so on.
Was the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission that was in office from 2000 to 2005 eventually served as vice chair, and this commission is better known for the work around bombers. You could tell us how the exercise through what became the bombers draft, Kilifi draft, Wako draft, whatever they called it, eventually set the foundations for the current legal framework on gender inclusion?
Let me say, before bombers, because bombers actually received the draft from CKRC, the commission. Yes. And before that, the commission, which, led by Yashpa Guy, and the first vice chair was Oki Obaka, who passed away, I think, in 2002, 2003. Okay, yes, and then after that, Ukodho Gendo became the first vice chair. We had two vice chairs because Professor Salim was also a vice chair. This is initially until after bombers. After bombers, when Professor Guy left, Abida Ali was appointed the chair, and then the commission elected me as the vice chair for the rest of the commission, and for the other things until after the 2005 referendum. But the most important thing I can say about what happened is the way women organize themselves from not just at bombers, but even at the start of the process. Where they put themselves at the center. They were very coordinated, they were very well organized. They influenced the law itself, because when the law was being written, the law to review the Constitution, when it was being written, that is when 1/3 representation of women was anchored in the law. And it was because the women themselves negotiated for this. They became a very powerful voice. Out of 12 members of the committee, it was called the Sulumeti Committee, that prepared the legislative framework. 5 of them, I think there was myself, Phoebe Asio, Zipporah Kitonyi, Martha Karua, and I think Abida Ali, Nancy Baraza. So, but that is the one team that was completely organized. We were almost half of the team, and the others had their own political parties, but the women were one party. The women themselves, they were like one tribe. Okay, not tribe. Okay, like one party. At the national level and at the county level, since we had district representation and so on.
One of the biggest gains we had this was seeing more women getting into parliament. We cannot fail to mention the Honorable Martha Karua, currently Governor Charity Ngilo, Honorable Phoebe Asio, Ambassador Tabitha Say, making her attempts in some of the toughest places. But we cannot miss out Governor Ngilu running for the presidency in 1997, Professor. What were the lessons learned in those years?
Yes, but Governor Ngilu actually had the first shot in 1992. And even at that time, women were already organizing themselves to promote women in politics. And I think there's quite a bit of writing on this. Women in Politics is one of the books I've authored with some other people. Women and Democracy, which I authored with Maria Nzomo and Professor Kasiani. There's a sense in which 1997 was a culmination of a lot of struggle for the previous 10 years, beginning with 1992, when in February 1992, when women actually had a conference at the KICC, and they actually came up with the idea of the 30% as far back as 1992. And that conference was addressed by Phoebe Asio, Martha Karua, Maria Nzomo gave the keynote address, Wangari Maathai. Women in politics were actually selling their parties, to the women in the country, and saying we need to join political parties for us to be able to participate in politics. So there was a high level of consciousness raising in the 90s. And it's also, by the way, around the same period, I think 1992, when we talked about the amendment of the constitutional amendment, which allowed for multi-party democracy, going back to multi-party democracy, but which also touched on women's rights, on equal participation of women, but not in the same way, but allowed for even nominated members of parliament for women to access the nominated member of parliament. That was around the time that Phoebe Asio and Martha Karua were in parliament. And in fact, they pushed that agenda, but they were also working with women's organizations. I remember some of the organizations we were working with, were closely working with the women in parliament. There were few, but we were still working with them in parliament. And this actually ended up being coming to 1997, when the Phoebe Asio motion for the 1/3 women, not 1/3 by the way, it was for the increased affirmative action for increased participation of women was tabled in parliament. That time we were not even talking about 1/3. We were talking about adding about 18 women, 2 from each region. There were 8 provinces. 2 from each province, which makes 16, plus 2 from Rift Valley because of the size of the Rift Valley. And the motion was defeated in parliament. It was tabled in 1997. But as it was being tabled, the women were already outside the parliament, and they formed the Women's Political Caucus. So it was a very political decade, 1990 in particular, with very high level sensitization, consciousness, but also with what you call social self-mobilization, with women coming together, irrespective of political parties, ethnic interests, and so on. And that is also what made it possible for them to actually bring the agenda to the constitution-making process.
And also the University of Nairobi has the Women's Economic Empowerment Hub. There is work they're doing together with KBC around this. Tell us some of the key findings that have been made through this institution and how it is shaping, national policy.
Thank you very much for that question. Let me say that when we came to KBC to request that we have this collaboration, is because we have generated a lot of data, some of which we are using, to influence policy, and we have done that. We have shared some information with the National Treasury, with the Department of Gender Affairs in the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Social Protection. We have also shared the information with with the Department of East African, with the Ministry of East African Community, particularly because we are also dealing with women in cross-border trade. We have shared with very many people, but we actually realize that the sharing that we do is not really reaching the general public. And that's why we thought about this collaboration with the KBC, particularly through our local languages, because they are still listened to. That sometimes instead of a meeting where you travel, to Nakuru to go and to talk to 40 or 50 people, we can talk to many people within the different regions, almost at the same cost or even less. So we also think that this is part of our national identity, recognizing that each community has its own language, which we actually promote, which carries their culture and so on, and that sometimes for things that affect them, they are also able to express them in their own languages. So I think it is we consider this to be a very, very important collaboration in sensitizing Kenyans, and many of them who don't get to know sometimes what is happening at the national level or even what is happening at the county level. I know that through this collaboration we have received information and excitement from the general public in Kikamba, in Nosim, I think the Maasai one, in the Somali language, in Doluo, in different Kalenjin, languages, and also in Luya languages and so on, and Kikuyu as well. So I think it is we feel very satisfied that actually the university is talking to the community in their own languages and wherever they are. And in this way, we find them raising the questions which we do not sometimes find in the field. Where do we find these affirmative action funds? Who is it that we should talk to if the women groups in our area are looking for the money and so on? What is CGS? What is this government package? Who can access this particular package? What is AGPO? How do you get to know about the contracts at the county level and so on? Who should apply? So in a sense, we are having a national dialogue just through KBC by communicating through our own local languages, and we think it's a very, very important tool. But this is also a tool that brings communities together on a specific issue that concerns all of them, the women's economic empowerment. So I believe that we will be able to share some of this information, even the reach, the population that we can reach through these languages. And we believe it's very good value for money, and it is very important for us to utilize these languages and communicate the information. So, and we find that they are also feeling very happy that we are talking about specific, specific data that we have received from different counties and sharing with other counties through the different languages. We are also doing the same, by the way, with the gender budgeting, and with the gender budgeting, getting people to be aware that through public participation, because, by the way, public participation is a constitutional right. Yes. It is a right that the Kenyans have to input into the policies that are being created by government and county governments and so on. And we find that the women are very interested in this, and they are actually beginning to make presentations to the various stages of the budgeting processes at the county level, and the counties are also responding in a very positive manner. So it's a very good strategy for promoting women's economic empowerment.
Thank you very much, Professor Wanjiku Mukabi Kabira, who is the director of the African Women Study Center at the University of Nairobi. She has been chair of the Department of Literature and has used her platform in academia to champion for the rights of Kenyan women and also on the continent. These rights are not just political, but they are also in health, in economics, and in food security. She has also served as the vice chair of the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission that was in office from 2000 to 2005. And she continues to call for safe spaces for women to achieve their full potential. Thank you very much, Professor Wanjiku Mukabi Kabira, for your insights on this edition of The Living Legends. Keep watching KBC Channel 1. My name is Daniel Wahome.